Hi, welcome to Roadmap, the Auto Trader podcast for all things products and tech. This episode we're looking at engineering apprenticeships. I've got three guests with first-hand experiences in this area. Hi Charlotte.
Hello.
Hello Luke.
Hiya.
And last but not least, hi Mark.
Hello.
Cool, so before we crack on, do you want to give a brief summary on your sort of area in apprenticeships?
Sure. I work in early careers. I'm a software developer, but my focus is working with early career software developers. So I work with a lot of graduates and apprentices and career changes, that kind of thing.
Cool. Cheers, Mark. Charlotte?
So currently I'm a professional developer, but I did do a degree apprenticeship, finished that last year, and that was in software engineering with MMU.
Cool. And last but not least, Luke?
Hiya, I'm an early careers developer. I finished my apprenticeship about a couple of weeks ago. It's a level 4 apprenticeship in software development.
Cool. So nice little mix there. So I'm really intrigued, especially for yourself, Luke and Charlotte, how and why you decided to go down the engineering apprenticeship route. I don't know who else. Do you want to go first, Luke?
I'll go first, yeah. I'd been basically working in admin for quite some time. And it got to the point where it's like there's literally nowhere for me to progress. I probably need to do something completely different. I was talking to a few people, and I think it was my brother who said, "Why don't you try go at coding?" I'm like, "Yeah, go on then," because I've not really done anything since we had like a Commodore 64, and I was typing go-to 10 lines to get some
Commodore 64.
Yeah.
Real.
Some really basic games. That's the last time I'd ever really done any coding. And I was copying stuff out of magazines as well, so that doesn't really count.
That dates you, Luke.
I know, right? So I was like, I had a look online for some free stuff. And I was like, I could do this. This is all right. Let's have a crack at this. And then I was looking at ways in to a job, and that seemed a bit more difficult in that everyone wanted some experience, and I've got zero experience at the time.
So the Commodore 64 experience.
People weren't really people didn't really respect that, which is shocking.
Should have gone with a Specky 48K Plus.
Yeah, I reckon that might have got me a bit more cred. Yeah. So I was looking at ways in. There's like a bunch of boot camps people were running, but they were all like several £1,000s, which I did not have lying around at the time. And I think it's my wife said to me, "You'd like to look at apprenticeships." I was like, "Apprenticeships? I'm like nearly 40. Well, I am 40 now." And I was like, "Yeah, but anyone can do an apprenticeship." I was like, "You sure?" So I looked into it, and I was like, "Okay, I'm going to get paid for learning. I can cope with that." So it's a bit of a pay cut, but yeah, I applied to Manchester Digital, and after an amount of process, started here.
Brill. Awesome. What about yourself, Charlotte? Similar or very different?
Mine's different, bit too complicated if you ask me. I think I didn't originally want to go into engineering, to be fair. So I wanted to go into science, and I was just absolutely failing miserably in my A levels. I resat my AS so many times that I'd have had to defer my year, before I could be able to reset them basically. So I was not doing very well in college. And obviously realised that I was not going to get the grades to go to uni, so there was no other choice. I felt like I was better doing experimental stuff rather than kind of academic stuff too. So I looked for an apprenticeship and got into industry with AstraZeneca. I was doing QA lab technician stuff. I was looking the part of my lab coat and everything, loving it. And then just realised it just wasn't what I wanted.
Right.
But the beauty of it was I didn't go to uni, so I didn't have student loans. So I was like, I'll do another apprenticeship. Did it in web dev type stuff. Yeah. Realised I didn't really like the web dev type stuff. Wanted to do it more back end. But I was also doing much better with my grades because I actually enjoyed it. And I saw the ad for the degree apprenticeship in software engineering, and I was like, I'll have a go at that. So 3, collecting them apparently, apprenticeships.
So third time lucky you found the one. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah.
So how long ago was that?
I think it was 1066 or something. I don't know actually. It was this was 5 years for about 9 years of apprenticeships, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what about yourself, Luke? I mean, how long was your journey to get to today? With the apprenticeship.
Just the apprenticeship. It was. I started during lockdown, so it's probably a little bit longer than most people's experiences would be. But it was about two and a bit years.
Right. Cool. What about self, Mark? As in moving into your current role, supporting early careers,
So I've
graduate
had,
devs, etc.
this is like my third different role at Auto Trader. So I started as a software developer, working on consumer-facing stuff. Then I moved into operations, so still working as a dev on a dev team. Then moved into this role working in early careers. So that was probably about 6 years ago now.
Right.
And it's something that I think it's interesting. It kind of builds on some of my strengths around explaining things, asking people probing questions, being quite thorough. And it's always something that I've been interested in, kind of supporting people and developing people.
Yeah.
So like the second time I was a manager, I actually really enjoyed it. I really enjoy seeing somebody learn, kind of unlocking the potential in people. And I think in a role, in various early careers roles, everybody's so different. Everybody has different requirements, and it's important to be quite tailored to the individual.
Right.
So that's the interesting bit, the fact that everybody's different.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I just enjoy, supporting people.
Yeah. And what did it look like? Again, I'm going to go to the apprentices. Is that the right word?
Apprentice.
Apprentice.
The apprentice, the people who've been through the process. So what was it like actually arriving day one? I know, Charlotte, this was your third iteration, but like for you, both of you, you've come in at different times. What was it like joining Auto Trader as apprentice? Those like formative weeks.
Okay, I guess for me, and just to make things even more complicated, when I did my degree apprenticeship, I started at a different company. So I actually came to Auto Trader halfway through.
Wow. It's like another layer
yeah,
of complexity.
absolutely. Just, don't like to live life simply, really. So I think for me, like, it was, unfortunately, they didn't really have the capacity for, like, an apprentice to have kind of one-to-one time with someone. So when I came to Auto Trader, I think the best thing that I want to highlight, and I guess the thing that I felt I got the most support from, was the tech mentoring, or it was buddy, like the buddy system at the time. I really don't think my tech mentor realises how much kind of impact they had on my progression, because it was like they were so keen to kind of adapt the way we worked to how I actually learned best, like that. Like the support was always there. Like I just started to learn properly and progress. And I think for me, like, that was, when I first joined, that was the biggest impression I had, and it was great.
And do you get paired up with a tech mentor, like a buddy from like day one?
Yeah. Well, I did, yeah.
Yeah. What about yourself, Luke? So arriving in the AT office first day.
Well, didn't arrive in the AT office first day because it
you
was
were
during
COVID.
lockdown.
Oh.
Yeah. So my first day was entirely remote.
How was that?
Yeah, that was an experience. Yeah, I mean, I'd been working remotely for the previous company for a while at that point, so it wasn't completely alien to me as a concept. But obviously, being, first day of a job on my own, essentially waiting for Teams calls to happen. But there was pretty much straight after that, I was on my Manchester Digital Boot Camp for 4 weeks.
Right.
So basically learning some of the fundamentals, learning Java as well, which I wasn't actually planning on doing, and I ended up working in JavaScript anyway, which is the bit I'd learned beforehand. But so essentially learning a completely different language. But yeah, the fundamentals of programming, testing, and all that sort of thing.
So how long was it when you joined? I know you were remote. That you went on to the boot camp, was that within a couple of weeks?
It was pretty much immediately. I think I started on a Thursday and then had a bit more induction on the Friday, and then the following Monday it was the start of the boot camp for 4 weeks.
Join and get your laptop and get it all set up so you're ready to go, and then off into learning world.
Yeah. And what's your? I mean, obviously we're looking back at Charlotte and Luke's experiences, but thinking right now, Mark, in terms of current intake of apprenticeship, what is it similar as it was when these two came in, or has things evolved?
That's a really interesting
tweaked?
question. So this is we've got our 8th cohort of apprentices starting in software development in September. So we've been doing it a long time. In that time, we've had to kind of learn. We've had to learn how to deliver an apprenticeship. We've had to adapt as the standard has changed. So there was a big change to the software developer standard, the level 4 one, which Luke's done. So Luke was the first year that we had that new standard, which was fantastic. So we had to adapt. and it meant that Luke didn't have to do a very painful exam as well, which he's very pleased about. But yeah, so we've had to kind of adapt over the years about how we actually work with the apprentices.
Right. And what's your role again? Like today, what is your role in those first few weeks? Are you one of the tech mentors, or do you organise the tech mentors? How does that work?
So I'm more in a role where I'd support the tech mentors and the managers. So we think at Autotrade it's really important to have that, as Charlotte said, that one-to-one support, and it's the thing that people name check a lot as being really helpful. And we actually find that at the moment it's brilliant. We're at the point where we've got people who've gone through the apprenticeship program, and they've developed to a point where they're now supporting people who are apprentices. So we've got that sort of cycle built up.
Yeah.
I think something that people underestimate around early careers programs is it takes a long time to pay off. You've got a pipeline of people coming in, and they take a lot of support, but you do get fantastic people out of the end of it. Examples. And it's fantastically virtuous that it's starting to support itself. Yeah. So that's great. So my role, I do a lot of support for the tech mentors, for the managers. I'll have regular conversations with them. In the past, I've been actually delivering. So poor Luke, in lockdown, we had to suddenly learn how to deliver training remotely, which was interesting.
How many on your intake? How many other remote Lukes were there? There's Luke plus.
There's actually only 7 on my cohort.
It's a small cohort.
Yeah.
What's the average size of a cohort usually?
It's been as high as about 17.
Wow.
But not huge.
Right.
But, I mean, it depends on the provider.
Yeah.
So Luke's with Manchester Digital. We have apprentices with Ada, who will have generally about 30 people in a cohort, and there's slightly different models.
Right.
So not so much involved with delivery of training anymore, which that's been a huge thing for me to learn. Both my parents were teachers, and I grew up saying, I'm never going to be a teacher.
Yeah, mine would have a teacher. Like, I want to be a teacher, and like, you've got 0 patience. Find another career.
Yeah, but it's been really interesting, and it's actually been a huge challenge learning a bit about learning theory. Don't know much about it, but so kind of I try and do a bit of strategy around making sure that the people that we've got are supported properly, that we're not overcommitting, that we're looking at the right sort of content, and actually getting involved with some of the external providers, looking at the material that they deliver and making sure that it's appropriate and relevant.
Right. And what's it like, again, going back to yourselves, Luke and Charlotte, what's it like balancing that education angle with the actual working in an organisation on developing products? How does that work? Is that a challenge?
For me, like having not been in education for quite some time at that point, the adjustment to, being in a work environment, but also technically being in education at the same time, it's like I just kind of forgot that I was in education quite frequently. I was just trying to crack on with work that I perhaps wasn't quite ready to do yet, and forgetting that, hey, I'm supposed to be learning stuff here. But I kind of adjusted to that as time went on. But that was that was kind of a challenge. It's
So what was the reminder points? Is there things during your apprentice where you have to have those learning things, or is it a case of it's always at your own pace and your own self-management?
Well, there's a couple of things. There was because we had the occasional sort of mini boot camps, sort of about once a month, and sort of the first sort of part of the apprenticeship, we had like a regular thing that was known as Apprentice Bay on a Tuesday, where the likes of Mark and Alec and Heather would basically go through some coding fundamentals with us, and
that was like an Autotrade thing, wasn't it?
That was an Autotrade thing, yeah. Just as sort of a weekly reminder that we're learning.
Yeah. What about yourself, Charlotte? Was it similar for you?
In terms of
just the balancing the education with the work?
I did not like that. And I'm not going to pretend and say that I was really good at it either. My poor student liaison, we have so for me, I was at university, so I had actual assignment deadlines. But you also do with apprenticeships, you do a portfolio, which is kind of proof that you're kind of learning on the job, and it's I left like all of that till the last minute. My poor student liaison at MMU was like, just to remind you, we've got to get it done. And I was like, yeah, I'll be fine. Like a week later, I'm like, right, and like try and get it done. And it's, yeah, I think like Luke said, it's not done deliberately. I think sometimes you can get so like for me, I love my job, and like my priorities were just totally there because like I learned so much there and I loved it so much that you just forgot like sometimes to kind of, it's like, oh, I am learning, you know, and I have to deliver that. And I think what was really good was that, I mean, having done 30 gazillion apprenticeships now, like generally the employer, but Auto Trader included, are quite good at being flexible, but you've got to like swallow your pride and own up to being like, you know, I've left everything till the last minute and I'm going to need a little bit more time. Like, and normally it's like, you know, but it's like, yeah, we'll find you some time. It's important, you know.
It might surprise you to hear that you're not the only one.
Well, hopefully.
And who is it that, because you mentioned about the university liaison officer, is it who you're doing your degree apprentice with that are prodding you for you've got these assignments coming up, or is that something that, Mark, you prod for, or is it somebody else? Is it all down to yourself? Who does that?
It's a mixture. I think like obviously it's in Auto Trader's best interest. It's like also in your contract, not in like a like it's important, like it's part of your role, isn't it? So I think like for me, my liaison would be the person who'd be saying like, oh, you know, you're up to date with this, you're up to date with that. We'd have like 3 monthly meetings, and I think from a wellbeing point of view as well, they'll check in on you to say like, you know, they'll have a meeting with you and your manager and just say, you know, how's everything going at work? Is she struggling with anything? Blah blah blah. So I think it's like a progress and a wellbeing kind of thing, and then obviously if you are behind, then Auto Trader may step in and just. But luckily, that didn't happen for me. But
and is that similar, Mark, for all different providers of the
so
apprenticeships?
Providers, if you think about it, so Charlotte's doing, which I should zoom out actually, because people might not know everything about apprenticeships. So Luke's did a level 4, which is kind of like the first year and a little bit more of university. Charlotte's done a degree apprenticeship, which is a level 6. So Charlotte finished with an actual degree and a certificate. So I've entirely distracted myself and forgotten what your question was.
It was the role of and
so
whether the providers, it's a similar, you know, if you were going to MMU or Manchester Digital, is it a similar sort of support from an academic perspective?
Every apprenticeship you've got the rule that 20% of your time has to be spent on off-the-job learning.
Right.
So there's rules and regulations around how apprenticeships are run. The provider has to make sure that that's happening via it being logged and recorded and that sort of thing. And given that, so in Charlotte's case, she spent a day a week at university. They don't see her for 4 days. They have a legal obligation to also check that she's being looked after by the employer. Because there are some unscrupulous employers out there that will take advantage of apprenticeships. So those regular check-ins would always, with every provider, they'll always include questions about, do you know who to report this sort of thing to? How are you feeling? That sort of thing. And then there's various programs that they have to go through. But then there's always the sort of checkpoints as well around progress, slightly different. So Luke had to tick off a bunch of knowledge, skills and behaviours, a very structured way. Had to work on a portfolio and then move into endpoint assessment. Had to work on a work-based project and then interviews.
But not. You said you didn't have to do it. You didn't have to do an exam.
I just had to write about like 25,000 words instead.
Was that the alternative to an exam? Was it?
They used to have the level 4 standard used to require a professional qualification.
Right.
And that was one of the modules that was dropped in the newer version of the standard, which was it literally used to be for some people 6 months of study, focused study, and it was stuff that you would never need to know as a developer. Really, really mean questions.
Mean questions.
I had to learn a lot about Java to help them to learn. So that was good that Luke didn't have to do that. But so in Luke's case, he had this set of KSBs that he had to go through. Charlotte's doing a different standard. With a degree apprenticeship, it's all handled by the university. So in the form of projects. So the university's setting projects. You're completing them, hopefully.
It's done now.
And then so there's not the same concept of the massive portfolio that Luke had to produce, but there's it all covers the same sort of thing, but in a slightly different structure.
So are you two both out of the educational side of things now? Like you never have to go back into that world again.
Yeah.
You can see us smiling. That's
Yeah.
no, I'm joking. Yeah. Yes.
And if you were, so probably looking back then, in the educational phase, so you're in the apprenticeship, in your case, Charlotte, you're at Art Trade and not your previous 2 apprentice places. Was there highs and lows during that educational journey, like ones where it was like, this is brilliant, and this is really hard? Was it the time pressures were the things that were, or the management of the overhead of educational stuff? What were the bigs like you loved, and what the bits were a bit more challenging?
In terms of education specifically,
Yeah,
or
while you're in that apprentice period.
Yeah, I think there are plenty of challenges. I think like time management, like when you are enjoying a full-time role and you kind of having to find time for this on the side as well. Sometimes for me, like I wasn't that motivated to do it quite a lot, I think. And I think that can be quite taxing on your mental health, for example. Like, so it's a bit of a catch-22, a bit of a cycle that happens, and it's kind of pulling yourself out of that. That was probably the biggest challenge for me, I think. Like, it was tricky to motivate myself, I would definitely say. The highs for me, in terms of the educational side, I guess one is that we did have to do like a workplace project, and that was like, you jump in the deep end, but do you know what? It was like the best thing that ever happened, because you do it within work and it's like all relevant to your job, and it's like really exciting because you kind of get to choose what you want to do. And I love that. Like I learned so much from that. Like you kind of get to dip into roles that you would never do.
Is that like at the end? Yeah. To the end of it.
Yeah, definitely. I will say getting my degree was probably and also not falling over on stage when receiving my degree was probably better. But yeah, I think that's about it for me.
What about yourself, Luke?
Well, I think the fact that the standard had changed and had started during lockdown might have had a couple of bonus challenges in there for me. Like learning entirely remotely was
I can imagine that
certainly a thing. Like the fact that the standard had changed, people weren't quite sure how the portfolio at the end was meant to look, or what it was meant to contain, or how the work-based project was meant to sort of pan out, how big it should be, how sort of level complex it should be. It was sort of very much open to interpretation, shall we say. I guess the training provider had some staffing issues, shall we say. So we had different people quite frequently meant to be providing the sort of feedback and support as we went along at their end. So that was definitely a challenge. Highs, largely realising, hey, I can do this. Working on things that the sort of growing levels of complexity as I went along, and finding myself like working on something involving technology I'd not heard of 6 months ago, and then being able to build something using it. It was like, oh, okay, that's nice.
How far through your apprenticeship before you kind of looked back and thought, I didn't used to be able to do this, I've learned loads? When did that happen?
First time it happened, probably about 6 months in.
Yeah.
And then probably about a month after that, I was like, oh my God, I don't know anything. Which I understand is quite common in the tech world anyway, no matter how long you've worked here. Some days you're just like, nah. Probably about 6 months in, I was like, oh, I can do this now. Yeah.
I think it's really common that people forget to look back.
Definitely.
And they think they continue. I have this with so many early careers developers, constantly looking at all the things they don't know. And you have to remind them that there's far too much knowledge to fit in one person's head, and look back at where you were 6 months ago.
Yeah. Definitely.
I think before I started, I was like, I'm going to learn everything there is to know about JavaScript. So then I started, I was like, that's not actually possible, is it? That's awkward, because
So you set this target and you're like, that is completely unachievable.
Yeah, put that one in the bin.
Yeah. So then it's interesting because it sounds like you've had slightly different challenges, different highs. But if there's one like going back where it might be someone's listening to this who wants to do an engineering apprenticeship, maybe has gone through a similar journey of they got into a career path they didn't want to do, or it might be someone just finishing school thinking that may be the route. Are there actual pearls of wisdom if you could look back at yourself 2 years ago or whenever you started to say, do you know what, heed these points because they'll be really valuable for you, even though probably you won't listen to them because you never do, but are there like pearls that you could, if you could tell yourself at the beginning of your journey to to look out for or do?
Yeah, I think more something I would probably highlight for other people to think about is that with an apprenticeship, I think it provides a different, it allows people who have a different learning style to actually progress. And I think that is something that's severely underestimated with apprenticeships. So I'm not a strong academic at all. Like, the whole reason I didn't go to university in the first place was I couldn't get those grades. And within the kind of the second to last year of my degree apprenticeship, I was diagnosed with ADHD as well, which, let me tell you, explains a lot of things, a lot of struggles, but definitely a lot of struggles with my studies.
Yeah.
And I feel like the workplace that, like the workplace element that the apprenticeship kind of provides allowed me to thrive. That's really where I thrived, and it was because it was so hands-on. And I think that's where I found myself actively learning and progressing. And I really think I'd have struggled if it was just purely on paper. So people are different, neurodivergent, neurotypical, people different, individually as well. I'm just saying, regardless of who you are, if you've got a different learning style, you struggle. I think it's something worth considering.
So being aware of your own learning styles and looking at what the opportunity really would have worked for you.
Definitely.
You probably would have come to the apprenticeship route anyway.
Yeah, 100%.
What about yourself, Luke?
Well, I mean, I guess I think you said it when we were talking about this before. It's never too late, you know. The idea that apprenticeships are, you look at all the literature around them, they're very much aimed at school leavers. There's no getting around it. But yeah, they're open to everybody, and you never know, might be what you need. For me, it was a case of making sure I made notes as I went along, because there's a lot of paperwork involved. A lot of paperwork. It's looking. I'd worked in admin for so much time beforehand, so I didn't have to worry too much about handling all the paperwork.
So is that when you say admin? Is it is that more? There's so much to learn and making reference it, or is it you actually have paperwork that you need to get completed at a certain time?
There's a bit of that element of the latter, yeah. There is obviously a lot to learn as well, but there's a lot to keep on top of in terms of making sure you've done this to get to that, and especially regarding the portfolio and making notes of the learning record and off the job. What's the off-the-job thing called? You had to make a record of all the stuff you'd done of off-the-job learning. It had to add up to a certain amount of hours.
Right,
so
isn't it?
So the proof.
Yeah, I know a lot of people who had left that really late to fill it in. And it's you've just got to look back at 2 years of your life and fill in all this information.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, so particularly for school leavers, going into an apprenticeship, it can be someone's first job.
Yeah,
and moving into that different environment can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah,
that thing that you've suddenly got to build up a habit of filling in that form every week to say what you've learned on a Tuesday or whatever day it was. That is for people a bit of a culture shock. And trying to write about something that you did 6 months ago. My memory's awful. If I hadn't. I find things I did 6 months ago and I've got no recollection of them. If I don't write notes, then I wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, I've not thought about that.
It's a challenge.
Yeah. So I can totally appreciate, especially if you've not in previous roles or if it's your first job, not had to do that, evidence providing, just being able to grow that habit really quick rather than make it really hard for yourself further down the line.
Yeah, I don't know who would do that. Definitely not me.
And then there's the other things to get used to at the same time, because you've got so much thrown at you at once. You're suddenly having to think about meetings and email and the way you collaborate with people and communication and turning up on time. And it's a huge shock.
Yeah,
it can be. But I think what Charlotte said about learning styles is really important. A lot of people do find it more useful learning through doing.
Yeah.
And we try and bring a lot of different learning styles in. I also love that we've got two very different stories here about backgrounds. So the main reason that Auto Trader really get into apprenticeships is, as everybody knows, the software developer market, and it's not just software developers that we work with. The software developer market is incredibly challenging to hire people, and we really can't ignore any source of talent. So apprenticeships give us an opportunity to reach people that we might not be able to reach otherwise. Sort of talent pool that previously it would have been that we would only hire grads. If you're only hiring grads, you're missing out on everybody who's never going to go to university, or somebody who doesn't want to, at the age of 38, take on a load of student debt. It opens up a more diverse group of people, which is fantastic, and that's the key thing for us.
Yeah. And did the apprenticeship feel very different here, Charlotte, than your other two forays in?
Yeah, like they're all different. Like, and I'm not going to go on because I could list like the millions of different things, but I think like different employers, they just do it differently. Like different teams of people, like how did it feel different? I guess it just. Well, I don't know. It's just like it was like I landed on my feet, and like there was people. Not that there wasn't support. I'm trying to be careful here. Like there wasn't support elsewhere. There was support elsewhere, but like for example, the tech mentoring thing was just so different. Like it's like they,
Did you say it was like a culture thing?
Yeah, I think so.
And does the tech mentorship? So I'm going a bit off tangent. Are you still like working with your tech mentor now, or does that? At the end of your apprenticeship, does that then finish, or is it like an ongoing thing where you continue to have some sort of connection?
I still work with him, like me and him are still working on the same stuff really, and we've got a very different relationship now and stuff like that, and it's really nice. And I'm now tech mentoring someone else as well, so it's like the cycle of life. It's nice, flip it on its head a little bit, so it is good.
And are you still working with your tech mentor as well, Luke? Or?
We're still, one of the teams I'm on is that we're on the same team, doing the same job essentially. Yeah.
And are you looking to get into tech mentorship in the future yourself?
I might do. I've not thought about it too much yet because I've only just finished my apprenticeship. So
I'm a break. I know. I was thinking the cycle of life. I've got this little lion in my hand.
It's really lovely chatting to people who have been through a program and have then stepped into a tech mentor role, because the conversations that you have with them. So first of all, my relationship with them has changed because they're no longer on a program, but the conversations around how they're developing, they're suddenly having to think about how they work with somebody else, how they think about somebody else's personal development, how they check whether they understand something and they're learning. And it's a completely different set of skills. So I don't know, Charlotte, you might have had that experience.
Definitely.
Of, your role changes and you're suddenly focusing on different.
Yeah, so oh my God, I've got to think for someone else now rather than them thinking for me instead. No, it's funny.
But it's really positive. For
your
development.
It is. It's great, and it's like a whole different set of skills, and it's a bit of a confidence booster, to be honest. Like it kind of confirms what you know, I guess, and what you don't know, which is good because then you can learn from that. So yeah, totally a positive. That's definitely what I meant. Yeah.
So does it feel like, Luke, because you recently finished in that sort of like bit of consolidation phase before like kicking into that those sort of avenues of next steps?
I'm still sort of essentially I'm just sort of thinking about what to move into. Obviously I've got a couple of work streams I'm working on still, thinking about learning the other front end framework that we use as well, so I've got more opportunities to do things in different teams. But in terms of sort of things outside of my direct role, I'm sort of thinking about what I can do where I might be useful.
Yeah. And what about yourself, Mark, in terms, you said like things have changed a little bit in the apprenticeship world.
Yeah.
So what's your sort of plans over the coming months? I know we got cohorts coming in later in the year, etc. So what does like the next N months look like from your role?
For me, my focus has previously been a bit more external because we've helped out one of our providers delivering training to a bunch of apprentices in different organisations. That's not something that we'll be involved with anymore. So myself and one or two other people's focus is shifting internally, which I quite like because I think where I think we're actually very strong when it comes to early careers, and I think there's an opportunity around actually supporting people beyond that a little bit further. Yeah. So I'm really excited about focusing internally a bit more, delivering training inside. That also gives us the opportunity to think about graduates a little bit more. there's loads of opportunities. There's always things that we can talk to developers about and teach. So that's really one of the focuses. And something else I've got really interested in and seen a bit of an opportunity around is actually introducing a bit more structure around how people progress, in terms not how they progress, how they learn and what to learn at different points. And there's as a newcomer to software, it's mind blowing. You can go on YouTube and have a look at how to be a developer and get 1 million results back, and somebody will say, oh, you need to do this 80 hours course, and they all cover the same sort of things, but there's not enough out there to help guide people through. Right, first of all, focus on this, learn that, get that under your belt, then have a look at this. Don't try and learn all the languages at once, that sort of thing. So I'm hoping to do a lot more work around structure, so like curriculums, that sort of thing.
And when does the next sort of intake of the cycle of the year? How do intakes? Sounds awful. Intakes. Like apprentices come in. Do they come in at cohort? That's the right word. Intakes. When's the next cohort joining?
So we've got a cohort starting in September through Manchester Digital. Around the same time, we'll have some degree apprentices starting as well with MMU, and that'll be the same course that Charlotte did, and one or two other people that we've got here. I think our applications are closed for those now. We've got our people in the pipeline, no names yet. And then most of our apprenticeships, because just remembering that we don't just do software development, we've got all sorts of apprenticeships across things like as diverse as finance and administration, but loads around products and technology. We tend to advertise those in February. So I think there's Apprenticeship Week, National Apprenticeship Week, and there's kind of a skills fair around then. And we're mostly around then. That's when we announce what opportunities we've got.
Because I've been working with a couple of design apprentices and BA apprentice. So I think it's something that, obviously I've not worked with yourself, Luke and Charlotte. I mean, Luke, we've sat at conferences and chatted over a couple of beers, but it's just interesting. I was going to start to see if any of the other disciplines where they've been through a similar route and how it is similar, how it is different.
What's really interesting is seeing how that's changed. So I think we've maybe invested a bit more in software developer apprenticeships over the year, in the past, and some of the things that we've learned from that are now being applied to the way we deal with apprenticeships. So the tech mentoring scheme is being rolled out to other apprenticeships and other disciplines. So if you were to be in finance, for example, you'd still have a tech mentor, somebody that knows your craft. So that's like, we see that works. So we're doing that.
So it's that cross-pollinating the ideas.
Exactly.
So is it engineering apprenticeships that we've been running the longest? Is it from a P&T perspective?
I'm biased, and that's kind of my focus. So I think that's probably the case, but I'm not qualified to say.
Okay, that's all right. We're just having a guess. No, that was brilliant. That was really interesting. And thanks for obviously sharing your own personal journeys, and Mark, your entry into this world too. So we are just about running out of time. I'm gagging for a brew. So big thanks to Charlotte and Luke and yourself, Mark, and to the listeners for tuning in yet again. And no doubt we'll be back soon with some other interesting stories from the land of Auto Trader Products and Tech.
Woohoo! Cheers.